So I would like to introduce our guest today. Professor Gregor Majdic is Vice Dean for Research and Professor of Physiology at Veterinary Faculty, University of Ljubljana, and also Professor of Physiology at Medical School, University of Maribor. He finished his undergraduate and master studies at Veterinary School in Ljubljana. Then he went to Scotland, where he obtained a PhD in medicine from the Medical School at University of Edinburgh. After working for 2 years back home in Slovenia, he went to the University of Texas to be a research fellow at one of the best medical schools in the USA. He returned to Slovenia in 2001 and established his own research group. His main research interest is sexual differentiation of the brain. His group is studying how genes, and in addition to hormones, influence the development of sex differences between male and female brains. Another area of research are endocrine disruptors, where his group is studying possible hormonal effects of several environmental pollutants. A few years ago, his research group have started to develop a method of using adult stem cells for treating joint problems in horses. The method is very successful, and he received several national awards for this development, including Chancellor Award for the Best Innovation at the University of Ljubljana, an award for the best innovation in public sector in Slovenia in 2011. To spread the stem cell treatment in animals, he established a spin-out company, Animacell, which now offers stem cell treatment for dogs and horses in 5 different countries. Besides more than 50 scientific articles in recognized scientific journals, he also published many popular science articles in different Slovenian newspapers and magazines. For writing popular articles, he received the prize for the best science writer, awarded by Slovenian newspaper Delo, and the Prometej Award from Slovenian National Science Foundation for excellency in communicating science to general public in 2010. So I believe this is a very good advertisement for this lecture, and I really wish you to enjoy this exciting topic. So, please.
Thank you very much. Hvala lepa za povabilo. Jaz bom prešel na angleščino, ker je bil tako dogovor. Tako da bom povedal predavanje v angleščini, potem vprašanja so lahko pa v obeh jezikih. So I will tell you today a little bit about stem cells and about our work with the stem cells at the vet school in Ljubljana. Regeneration has been a dream of the mankind since the dawn of civilization, and in mythology we have a lot of references about regeneration, possible regeneration, regrowth of limbs, of different organs. Perhaps the most famous is this story about Prometheus, who stole the fire from the Greek gods and was punished for that offense by being changed to the mountain. And every day the eagle came to eat his liver, and during the night his liver regenerated. So this process was repeated every day. In the Middle Ages, the alchemist didn't only search for the philosopher's stone to find a way how to turn the stone into the gold, but they also look how to regenerate limbs, how to regrow the parts of the human body. Especially in the Middle Ages, there was a big demand for that, with many wars going on, with a lot of society being quite cruel. But of course, they were also unsuccessful in these endeavors. However, in nature, there is regeneration. We all remember from the childhood that if you cut earthworm in 2 pieces, you will get 2 earthworms, which is actually not true. You will only get 1 earthworm. The side with the so-called sexual ring will survive and will develop into perfectly normal adult earthworm. So it is possible to regenerate in animal kingdom. Regeneration is quite successful in amphibia, to some extent in some reptilians, but after that it vanishes, and animals in the higher ladders on the evolution scale lost somehow the ability of regeneration. Perhaps the champion of the regeneration is this animal. I don't know if anybody of you knows this animal. Anybody knows this animal? It's called axolotl, Ambiostoma mexicanum. It's actually quite similar to a Proteus that lives in this area, in Postojna and other caves in karst region. These axolotls live only in some high mountain lakes in Mexico. And they're similar to Proteus in a way that they are amphibia that achieve sexual maturity at the larval stage. So they don't go through metamorphosis, they become sexually mature without going transformation into adult animal. And these axolotls are excellent in regeneration. They can regenerate pretty much every part of their body. They are widely used in the studies of regeneration. Several labs around the world are using them. And you can cut off virtually any part of the body you can imagine and they will regrow it. We don't know why, but they are very in the wild when they live in these lakes in Mexico. They're actually endangered species, so it's quite difficult to get them. But they're grown in the labs to study regeneration. In natural environment, they are quite wild animals, quite vicious animals that often fight, especially males. They fight very seriously, they get serious injuries. So there are some suggestions that they have such perfect regeneration to ensure survival after such fights. So in these animals, as we said, you can amputate any part of the body and it will nicely regrow. We actually did some studies several years ago in collaboration with Professor Comel from medical school in Ljubljana, studying expression of the genes during regeneration. And we had some axolotls in our lab. And after amputation, in anesthesia of course, 2 to 3 months later, the animals regrow the limbs. And I remember the first few ones that I was observing, we noticed after 2 or 3 months that they had some defects on the limbs. They had syndactylia, fingers grown together, not separated. And about 3 weeks or 1 month later, I looked at this same animal that I was observing. That was the first one in the experiment. And I noticed that the limbs were completely normal. The fingers separated, everything was fine. I was first asking my students to check for sure that this is the same animal that I was looking 3 weeks ago. It was. And what is happening that they first regrow the limb the normal size, but with some defects, some fingers joined together, but later they even correct these defects and their limbs become completely normal. And you can cut off parts of the nervous system, internal organs, they will regrow pretty much everything. So what is happening with axolotls, we don't know exactly yet, but some studies have shown that after the amputation, stem cells group at the site of the amputation, and they start to differentiate into different tissues, into bone, muscle tissue, connective tissue, skin tissue, and help to regrow completely normal limb. So it seems that during evolutionary development, we somehow lost the regeneration ability. Higher that we go up to the evolutionary scale, lower regeneration ability, and we still don't know why is that so. There are some hypotheses, some suggestions why mammals don't regenerate tissue, but we don't know if anything of this is really true. Some suggest that altered genetic differentiation is the cause of this lack of regeneration in mammals, that we simply, with the complexity of our genomes being developed, we have lost this primitive ability to regenerate. There are some suggestions that this is actually prevention to prevent tumor development, because stem cells are stem cells that are undifferentiated and could develop potentially into the tumors, although in axolotls there are no reports that during regeneration there will be any tumor development, but there are some suggestions that it might be the cause to protect us from that. Or maybe we simply don't have enough stem cells. Maybe we lost during evolution the large niches of stem cells in our bodies that would not support regeneration. But perhaps with the advancement of science in the last 10 or 20 years, there will be a solution to that. We now know that there are stem cells in many different parts of the body. Today we don't know only embryonic stem cells, but we have a lot of adult stem cells in different parts of the body. There are still much less cells than in axolotls parts of the body, but these stem cells can now be grown in the culture. They could be multiplied in the culture, and perhaps they could be used in the future for the treatment for regeneration of our bodies or bodies of other animals. So what are stem cells? cell to be called stem cell must fulfill two criteria. One is self-renewal. The cells should be able to divide and produce two equal daughter cells that are still able to divide into equal daughter cells. And normally, differentiate cells in mammalian body, they have very limited proliferation potential. After several divisions in the laboratory dish, they will stop dividing, but stem cells should divide for a very long time. We know today it's not true that they divide indefinitely. You will find in some older textbooks, older for the field, 5–10 years ago, saying that stem cells should divide indefinitely. This is not true. Adult stem cells do not divide indefinitely, but they would divide much longer than normal differentiated cells. In addition to that self-renewal, they should also have potential to differentiate into different tissues. And that depends on about what cells we are talking. Adult stem cells have much lower differentiate potential than embryonic stem cells or iPS cells, but still stem cells, to be called stem cell, should have ability to transform into different cells, at least in several types of the cells. So stem cells are cells that can divide indefinitely and can develop into different tissue types. The stem cell history is actually a little bit older than we usually think about that. We start to talk about stem cells a lot after 1998, when first human embryonic stem cells were isolated by scientists in Wisconsin, University of Madison. This, of course, attracted a lot of attention, but also ethical concerns, because these were embryonic stem cells derived from human embryos. And there are still a lot of debate whether it is ethical to use such cells or not. But as I said, the field is much older, but we didn't call it usually stem cells in the past. Bone marrow transplantations, which is a routine treatment for certain types of leukemia today in many countries, has been first introduced in 1959, and this is actually stem cell transplantation. We take hematopoietic stem cells from the healthy donor, from the bone marrow of healthy donor, and transplant these cells into bones of the patient with the leukemia, in which in this patient we previously destroy hematopoietic stem cells that divide in leukemia uncontrolled, and this is quite successful. In 1959 was the first attempt made in France. Interestingly, it was done on 4 patients from former Yugoslavia. At that time for Yugoslavia, there was a nuclear accident that was actually never reported in Vinča, close to Belgrade, the nuclear reactor, and 4 workers in that reactor were severely exposed to radiation. They were transported to Paris to perform this experimental treatment. They were unsuccessful, all 4 patients died, but already 2 years later, in 1961, there was the first successful stem cell transplantation in leukemia patients, and since then it became a routine procedure. Even embryonic stem cells are much older. First mouse embryonic stem cells were already isolated in 1981 and were actually very widely used since then for production of transgenic animals, for production of knockout mice. Before CRISPR and TALEN method, the only way to produce knockout mice was to use embryonic stem cells. There are several lines of these cells, and they have been widely used for many years. As I already mentioned, in 1998, first human embryonic stem cells were isolated, and after that, the field, we can say, exploded. In 2002, first adipose adult stem cells were described, and since then, we found that adult stem cells are found in virtually every tissue. For example, we know now that in brain, there are certain locations like hippocampus and olfactory bulbs, subventricular zone, that contain a lot of stem cells that could regenerate also parts of the brain. When I was a student, we were told that brain does not regenerate, that nerve cells are terminally differentiated and cannot regenerate. But now we know that there are stem cells also in the brain that could give rise to new nerve cells if there is some loss, and this is very important in stroke and some diseases of central nervous system. In 2006, first mouse iPS cells were created. iPS is an abbreviation for induced pluripotent stem cells, and we will come to that in a moment. What are these cells? iPS cells, but just briefly, these are adult cells that are, by genetic modifications, turned into stem cells. There was a lot of studies how to avoid the use of embryonic stem cells, how to avoid the destruction of embryos to produce stem cells, and this was one of the answers, iPS cells. In 2006, first mouse iPS cells, and already 1 year later, first human iPS cells were produced. Also in recent years, there were 2 Nobel Prizes for stem cells. In 2009, there was a Nobel Prize awarded for work with mouse embryonic stem cells, and in 2012, Nobel Prize for iPS cells. That was very quick, usually takes about 20 to 30 years to recognize the achievement by Nobel Committee, partially to see that the discovery is really that important, it has really important influence in the scientific field, but iPS cells were thought to be such important discovery that Nobel Prize was awarded to Japanese scientist Dr. Yamanaka already 6 years after his work. So we said that stem cells are cells that could self-renew and could develop into different types of cells, but not all stem cells are created equal. We have now, today we know different types of stem cells, and we can divide them by in different ways, by the source from which they originate, such as embryonic stem cells, adult stem cells, adipose tissue stem cells, nerval stem cells, or we can divide them in a way how they can differentiate. Stem cells from very early embryos are totipotent stem cells, but nobody really works with these cells. This is very difficult to grow them. They wouldn't grow in the culture. These are cells from the embryo before the blastocyst, from the morula stage, which is up to about 128 cells. And these are the only cells that are really totipotent. They can develop into new being, into new human, into new animal. But embryonic stem cells that we usually talk about originate from a little bit later. They originate from embryo when it's called blastocyst. This is this small bubble on the second. And in this stage, although this is only a few days old embryo, in humans, blastocyst develops around day 5 to 6 of pregnancy, far before implantation or anything like that. But at that stage, the embryo already divides into the cells that will develop into placenta and cells that will divide into new organism. Embryonic stem cells are part of the inner cell mass, these blue cells inside the bubble, and these cells can develop into any part of the body, but they cannot develop into new organism because they cannot develop into placenta, they cannot develop into trophoblast that would provide nutrients and protection and everything that the embryo needs for its development. And when we go later with the development, we came to adult stem cells, which are only multipotent, which means that they can develop into different types of cells, but not into many types of cells. For most of these adult stem cells, we still don't know what is really their differentiated potential. There are some suggestions that they can develop into embryonic layer from which they originally derive. If you're all familiar with biology, embryo very early on divides into 3 embryonic layers: ectoderm, endoderm, and mesoderm that give rise to different tissues. Ectoderm is the skin and neural system. This is the upper part of the embryo. Mesoderm gives rise to most of the internal organs, and endoderm gives rise to the lining of the digestive tract, endocrine glands, and similar. And there are some suggestions that adult stem cells could develop into the cells from the same embryonic layer. For example, because skin cells and nerve cells develop from the same embryonic layer, they could develop into each other, while, for example, adipose tissue stem cells, they could develop into bone cells, into connective tissue cells, because they derive from the same embryonic layer. So a little bit about each type of the stem cells. Embryonic stem cells, as we said, derive from very early embryo called blastocyst. We can harvest the cells from the blastocyst, these blue cells, put them into the culture, and we can successfully grow them in the culture. It's not very easy. They demand a lot of attention. They have to be grown on a special feeder layer of cells. They do not grow on their own. We have to provide them certain growth factors to prevent their differentiation. They will very quickly start to differentiate into some cells that wouldn't be any longer pluripotent, but with some care and proper conditions, they could be grown pretty much indefinitely. So embryonic stem cells are pluripotent. They can develop in any part of the body, but they cannot develop into placenta. But to get them, we need to destruct the embryo, which has caused a lot of ethical debates whether it is ethical to use human embryonic stem cells because we have to use the embryos. I mean, all cells that were used in the past for these studies came from the surplus embryos from in vitro fertilization procedures, so they're really embryos that would be destroyed anyway, because during IVF procedures, gynecologists always create more embryos than are used, because they fertilize several eggs that they get from the mothers, and they only implant several, in Slovenia, up to 3 embryos into the womb. So there are a lot of these surplus embryos that are anyhow being destructed after a certain period of time, but still some claim that this is destruction of life, and there are endless ethical debate about that. There are also some problems with embryonic stem cells. They would be only possible to use for heterologous allogeneic transplantations because we cannot get embryo from ourselves to get the embryonic stem cells that would be similar to our body. So we would have to, although there are some suggestions that stem cells are immunoprivileged, they did not elicit immune response. This is not clearly established yet, and there might be a problem with rejection reaction if you would use heterologous embryonic stem cells. So far, there is no clinical data about efficacy and safety. There was one clinical trial that I'm aware of with embryonic stem cells, transformed embryonic stem cells with company Heron in California, but although that was for the spinal cord injury, they reported success, good results at the beginning, but then they stopped the clinical trial, so nobody knows exactly why. So currently, as far as I know, there are no clinical trials with embryonic stem cells. Although I have to say that's true for the Western countries. They were being used in some clinics in Russia, China, and some countries with a less strict regulation, but it is potentially very dangerous. There was a few months ago, there was a report, I think it was in New England Journal of Medicine, about a patient in Boston in the US who came to the clinics. He had some tissue mass growing inside the spinal cord. He went for treatment I think in China and in Russia. In both, he received several treatments with stem cells, and nobody knows what kind of stem cells, probably all embryonic stem cells. And they found that he had some very strange tumor growing on around his spinal cord in the spine. So there is a concern with embryonic stem cells because they are very undifferentiated cells that could divide indefinitely, that they could develop into cancerous cells. To overcome this question about heterologous allogeneic transplantations, there are some ideas to use cloning procedure, or better called somatic cell nuclear transfer, to produce embryos from the patient. This is how the first mammalian clone was done, Dolly the sheep. But the same procedure could potentially be used to produce embryonic stem cells that would be autologous for the treatment of the patient. You would take a nucleus of some cells, fibroblast or any cell in the body, use this to transplant the nucleus of that cells into the oocyte, activate this oocyte with the diploid normal nucleus, oocyte from the donor woman, create blastocysts in the tissue culture lab, and then use these inner cell mass from the blastocyst to produce embryonic stem cells that will have the same genetic makeup as a patient from which the original nucleus arrived. But this is still very far from being achievable. It would be also an extremely expensive procedure. And again, it would be still ethically questionable to create embryo for the purpose of creating cells for regeneration. So it will not become reality anytime soon, I think. So to overcome problem with the embryonic stem cells, scientists created induced pluripotent stem cells. What are these cells? It was done by great work by Shinjo Yamanaka from University of Kyoto. He was looking what genes are expressed very early on in the embryos during transformation, during gastrulation, when embryo starts to develop from this bubble with a small mass of cells, inner cell mass, into a proper embryo. They found, I think, about 120 genes altogether, and then they did very tedious work. They tested each of these genes, transform a combination of all of these genes, which was a huge number of combinations, into adult cells grown in the culture. They worked with fibroblasts, and they found that 4 genes would actually make adult cells back into the stem cells. These are these 4 genes: SOX2, OCT34, KLF4, and c-MYC. So the idea behind that is isolate cells from the patient, treat them with these reprogramming factors, wait for a few weeks, and create stem cells that are actually pluripotent. So they're like embryonic stem cells. They're not like adult stem cells. And then we could potentially regrow these cells into different organs and use them for treatment in certain patients. However, there is a problem that 2 of these genes that I have shown, KLF and c-MYC, are definitely oncogenes, and SOX2 and OCT3 and 4 are probably oncogenes. So all 4 genes are genes involved in tumor transformation, and there is a big danger of development of tumors when using iPS cells. Although there are some suggestions that it will be used in clinical trials soon. I recently talked with one Slovenian colleague who worked with stem cells previously in the States. Now she works at Boltzmann Institute in Vienna. She works with iPS cells, and I asked her whether she thinks they will be used in clinic, and she said that probably never, and because of this danger of tumor development. They're a great model to study stem cell biology, a great model to study different diseases, but she thinks it's unlikely they will be used in clinical medicine because of these dangers. However, luckily, there are also adult stem cells, which answers a lot of these concerns about the stem cell treatments. They're found in many different tissues. Today we know that we can find them in pretty much every tissue in the body. There are a lot of stem cells in adipose tissue, and pretty much everybody of us would be quite happy to donate some adipose tissue to produce stem cells, but they can be found in other areas: brain, muscle, liver, bone marrow, intestine, gonads, so many different tissues and organs in the body. These cells, as I said already, have lower differentiation potential. They cannot develop into any part of the body, but they can develop into different cell types. And even the suggestion that they can develop only into the cells from the same embryonic layer are being questioned in recent years. There are some suggestions that even adipose tissue cells can develop into neural cells. We also did some studies. One master student did a study with canine stem cells that we work with, and we did get some cells that look like neural cells after differentiation. So there might be still a lot of unanswered questions about their potential, and maybe we just don't know enough how to change their differentiation. So neural stem cells are present in different parts of the body, mainly 2 parts of the body: hippocampus and subventricular zone in olfactory bulbs. And there are a lot of stem cells that can develop into both functional nerve cells, and they can develop into glial cells, cells that support neural cells in their work. they can develop into neurons, oligodendrocytes, or astrocytes. And this is important because this shows that neural tissue can regenerate, and a lot of studies have shown that being active, these stores of adult stem cells are getting smaller and smaller when we age, but with being active, both intellectually and physically, this could replenish our, stimulate stem cells in the nervous system to divide, to have more stem cells. And now it is well established, we all know from experience that it's good for older people to be active both physically and intellectually, but we have now studies that actually show that both physical activity, increased blood pressure, increased oxygenation of the blood, and intellectual activities, they stimulate proliferation of stem cells in the brain and could delay the onset of dementia that's associated with the aging of the brain. There are stem cells, of course, in the gonads, especially in the testes when spermatogonia proliferate all the time. They're typical stem cells. In ovaries, cells that give rise to the oocytes are dormant, so they're not proper stem cells, but in testes there are a lot of stem cells. There are stem cells in muscle tissue that helps regenerate muscle. If we injure the muscle, these stem cells will allow regeneration of muscle types. And the idea about the existence of stem cells in the muscle tissue also gave rise to the idea to overcome the problem with the farming, how to produce the meat, to grow the meat in the lab. So what is the idea? I'll just briefly mention this, because it has been published widely in media about 2 years ago that first meat in vitro was created without use to cool the animals. So the idea behind this is that we take muscle stem cells, grow them in the tissue culture dish, differentiate them into adult muscle cells, make muscles from them, and make a nice juicy steak. This is the idea. The reality is very different. Even this hamburger that was produced 2 years ago in Holland and was being consumed by some gastronomical journalists. The problem with cells, not just stem cells, any cells that we have, is that we cannot grow them in 3 dimensions. There are a lot of attempts with different scaffolds, different ideas how to make it, but because the cells don't get food and oxygen, when they start to grow into the thickness, they will start to die in the middle. So at the moment, we don't have any means how to make cells to grow. They can expand in the tissue culture dish, around the tissue culture dish, but as soon as they have to start to grow in thickness, they will start to die in the middle, basically start to rot, and nobody, of course, wants rotten meat. So in that experiment, which was actually, they calculated that the price of this hamburger was about 110,000 euros, so pretty expensive for the hamburger. What they were doing, they were growing muscle stem cells in the tissue culture dishes in a lot of thousands and thousands tissue culture flasks, and then they pulled this together, these muscle cells, to create this hamburger. The journalists said it wasn't very tasty, which is also understandable because they only had muscle cells, while what gives a nice taste to the meat is combination of muscle cells, adipose tissue cells, connective tissue cells. So all this combination gives rise. So we are still far from being able to create a proper steak in the tissue culture dish. So there's no easy answer to that. Of all adult stem cells, perhaps the most talked about are mesenchymal stem cells, which are stem cells that could be found in different places, but most often we talk about the stems from the bone marrow and adipose tissue. These cells are present in pretty large amounts in both bone marrow and adipose tissue, actually even more in adipose tissue than in bone marrow. There are some studies suggest that up to 5% of all cells in adipose tissue, white adipose tissue, are resident stem cells. They could be very easily isolated, and they could be very easily differentiated with certain growth factors into osteoblasts, adipocytes, or chondrocytes. And there are some studies suggesting that they can develop also into other types of cells, like heart tissue, bone cartilage already said, cornea, liver, muscle, nerve. So they could potentially, they have very wide use. So what are characteristics of mesenchymal stem cells? They can differentiate into different cell types, although they are not pluripotent, they cannot differentiate into every cell type in the body. They are fairly easy to obtain, fairly easy to grow and maintain, and of course there are no ethical concerns about working with mesenchymal stem cells. However, they do have lower transdifferentiation potential, but as we'll talk in a minute, some studies in recent years suggest that more important regenerative action of stem cells is not in their differentiation potential, but in secretion of certain substances that promote healing, endogenous healing processes in the body. So just quick comparison of these three types of the cells. Embryonic stem cells, they originate from very early embryo. They are pluripotent, they can develop into every part of the body. They have very high replicative capacity and self-renewal. They will self-renew indefinitely. But there are concerns about the tissue rejection because we could only use heterologous stem cells. They are subject to ethical debate, and there is a big potential for teratoma and teratocarcinoma to develop after we inject them into the body. There are currently no clinical trial data. iPS cells derive from reprogramming of somatic cells. They are actually totipotent. iPS cells could be transformed also into placental cells, so they are actually totipotent cells. They could be produced autologous for treatment in regenerative medicine. There is, of course, large reservoir of cells. We can turn any cell in the body into iPS cells. There is a big supply of these cells. But there are also weaknesses. There is no clinical data about their efficacy, and there is a big danger of teratoma and teratocarcinoma development. There are some attempts to recreate them in different way, not to make genetic modification, but just to induce proteins or RNA for these four genetic factors for a limited period of time, hoping that this will only temporarily change their nature and that they will remain stem cells without these genetic factors that cause tumor transformation, but this has not been shown yet that it could be done. And then adult stem cells, they originate from a lot of different tissues. They could be easily used for autologous regenerative treatments. There are more and more data about their clinical safety and efficacy, although they are typically lineage committed, so they cannot develop into any cell type in the body. There is limited number of these cells, although it's not, as we know now, it's not so limited, so it's not really weakness, proper weakness. They have limited replicative capacity, so we cannot divide for unlimited time, and they have somewhat lower transdifferentiation potential. Nevertheless, they're widely used today in clinical trials. There are no approved clinical treatments yet, but there are a lot of clinical trials going on. This is from the clinicaltrial.gov webpage from the US government, and you can see the numbers of clinical trials going on in different countries. These are almost all of these are with adult stem cells. They are being tested in different conditions, different diseases. Osteoarthritis, spinal cord injury, bone marrow transplantation is already done, and many, many other diseases. And we will see in future years, undoubtedly, a lot of their use in clinical medicine. In Slovenia, we are quite we're doing quite well in this field. We are pretty advanced. Stem cell treatments are being used in several fields in the clinical medicine. We are very successful in cardiology. Professor Bojan Vrtovec at University Clinical Center in Ljubljana is performing stem cell transplantations in patients with cardiac insufficiency, and he reports very good results. Of course, hematological oncology, but also now these novel stem cells are being used for different diseases. Currently, several young patients, children with leukemia, different types of leukemia, that develop host versus graft disease. This is a very serious condition when actually it's a kind of rejection reaction, and this could be alleviated with the treatment of adult stem cells. They are being used in clinical trials in orthopedics and also in proctology for incontinence, anal incontinence, and in gynecology in urinary incontinence. This has been done in 2 clinical trials. 2 Slovenian clinics are participating in this. It's actually some company from Austria, from Innsbruck, is conducting these trials. And I think this one with the urinary incontinence in women is already finished. And with the anal incontinence is still going on in clinic in Ljubljana. So stem cells are present in large amounts in different tissue, although it is not as easy as on this picture. They will just be dropped on us from the sky and we will miraculously heal. We still have to learn a lot about the stem cells, a lot about how to use them, what is the best way to use them, whether to use them undifferentiated or differentiated. So there are still many, many unanswered questions. Of course, stem cells have a potential not just in human clinical medicine, but if they can be used in human for treatment, why not to be used in veterinary medicine for treatment of animals? We thought about that several years ago, about 7-8 years ago, and we started to work with stem cells from white adipose tissue for treatment of problems with locomotor apparatus in horses and dogs. So we developed and do experimental treatments from 2009 to 2011 and started to introduce these clinical treatments in veterinary medicine at vet school in Ljubljana, and we created in 2012 this spin-out company, Animacell, that is now working in several European countries. So what we do, we collect a small piece of tissue, of adipose tissue, usually from the back between the shoulders, that's in dogs. The only reason is because the dog cannot scratch it. Requires a wound that requires 1 or 2 stitches. But we tried different tissues from abdominal fat, from inguinal fat, from the fat around the knee, if the dog is under the surgery for the knee. And the cells, we can obtain the cells pretty much from all these sources of adipose tissue. Although what we did found is that we get much better cells and more cells if the tissue is well vascularized. If tissue is poorly vascularized, we get much less cells, and it's more difficult to grow them. And this is in agreement with some studies suggesting that stem cells in adipose tissue are actually resident pericytes, cells that are close to the small blood vessels. So what we do, enzymatic digestion of tissue when we get it into the lab, then we seed and expand the cells and perform cell harvest to obtain the cells. And we know that we are working with stem cells because we can show they express some markers. This is one of the markers for stem cells with immunofluorescence. And we can transform these cells into different tissue types. Here, for example, is transformation into bone tissue, osteocytes stained with alizarin red, chondrocytes stained with Alcium blue, and we can also do adipose cell transformation. So far, we have treated over 300 dogs, and more than 90% of the owners report improvement, and this improvement is confirmed by clinical examination by the vets. And so far, there are no reports of any side effects. So we are running proper retrospective study. We will try to get the data from as many patients as possible. We have the data about all the patients treated to see if there are any indications for any side effects, but so far we have no indication there is any problem with that. So what are we treating? Osteoarthritis is the most common diagnosis. Osteoarthritis of the knee, elbow, hip dysplasia, which actually cannot cure hip dysplasia. Dysplasia is the formation of the bones that's in certain breeds of dogs. It's occurring. The acetabulum, the part of the hip joint in a hip bone gets extended, loses its proper shape, and this poses a problem for luxation of this joint. Of course, we cannot treat that because this is degenerative disease. We cannot change the bone. But with hip dysplasia, the osteoarthritis usually developed, and the stem cells help in that. Also, ruptured ligamenta cruciata, these are knee ligaments. Some vets are now using stem cell treatment as supportive therapy in that, because after ruptured ligamenta cruciata, very often arthritis develops, and stem cell treatment could alleviate the development of arthritis. We have done a small clinical study, fortunately small because with limited financial resources. This was done in 10 dogs. Most of them were German boxers who had osteoarthritis in both knees. And this was done double-blinded, so the veterinary who was treating these dogs and the owner didn't know into which knee were injected the cells, and in which knee we injected placebo, the buffer in which we usually supply the cells, in just the PBS buffer. And the yellow bar show limping, and this is according to Brunberg scale. It is a standard procedure for estimating the limping in dogs. Yellow bars represent limping before treatment, and pink bars 1 year after the treatment. And we can see that in all but one dog there was a marked improvement. 2 of the dogs stopped limping completely, and in other dogs there was a marked improvement. And in these dogs they didn't improve. This dog had very severe osteoarthritis. This was all done with our orthopedician at Vet School in Ljubljana, and he commented that he didn't even want to include this dog in the study, but the owners were very persistent. They want to be part of the study, and then he decided. His comment was that with this dog it was success that it didn't get worse because his osteoarthritis was so severe. And from the experience with these 300 patients, we do know now that it's much more successful treatment if you start in the early stages of osteoarthritis, not in the late stages when there are osteophytes already severely developed. So what stem cells do in the body? A quick answer, we don't know, and nobody knows. A lot of studies trying to determine, and in general, the opinion of the scientists have now in recent years shifted from differentiation idea. Before it was the idea that the cells, they differentiate. If you want to repair the cartilage in the joint, they will turn into cartilage. But we know now that this is probably not true. Some studies in laboratory animals and in some domestic animals, models like sheep and goat, have shown that stem cells do not engraft into the cartilage or bone tissue. They stay in some soft tissues, but they do not differentiate into cartilage tissue. So there must be some other mechanisms, and now it is thought that it's mostly through secretion of different factors that the cells secrete. It is well known that secrete a lot of different factors, like growth factors, AGF, EGF, interleukin-6, SCF, TNF-alpha, which have supportive function. They secrete a lot of cytokines like interleukin-1, 10, TNF-alpha, PGF, FGF, EGF, which suppress inflammation, inhibit apoptosis through secretion of IGF-1, SDF, VGF. They have antifibrotic potential by secreting IL-10, TNF-alpha, MMP9, and they could induce differentiation of cells by secreting differentiating factors. So the general belief at the moment is there's still very varied opinion between people working in the field of stem cells, but in general, it's kind of more likely that these cells secrete factors that trigger endogenous healing processes and do not differentiate into the cells as needed. So potential for use of these cells is very large. It can be used for treatment of the wounds. With Institute Josef Stefan, we are currently working on developing some biomaterials to be used for wound treatments. We want to have biomaterials together with stem cells to entrap them, because if you inject stem cells into the joint, that's fine because the joint is not vascularized. The stem cells would stay there. But if we inject them or put them in some very vascularized tissue like wound, which is very vascularized, most of the cells will get flushed away. So we want to entrap them into some material. There's potential use for cardiology, spinal cord injury, central nervous system. There are ideas about using the neurodegenerative diseases, and also in cancer. Stem cells, they have some, a lot of reports are now out suggesting that adult stem cells have homing mechanisms that attract them to the cancerous tissue. So there are ideas We're also planning to start some studies just now to use them as delivery system for some anti-cancerous agents, transform the stem cells with some cytokines or something that inhibit cell growth. But there is a problem with that, is the safety, because some of these factors that I showed also promote cancerous growth, like VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factors, has been shown to be important for growth of the cancer tissue. So there are still some questions about safety. Just very quickly, and we will finish, some preliminary result about the wound healing. This is actually done in a different way. We obtained some fibrin fibers from colleagues from the US, and we put the stem cells on them. This is this picture on the left. The green are stem cells stained with green color. And then we put these cells together with fibrin fibers on the wound of a horse that had a wound that didn't heal for several years. And this was not done as a proper trial because we didn't have any control, so it's definitely difficult to say whether it was stem cells that promote the healing or not. But the healing did occur. What is encouraging for us was that usually the wound will heal from the edges. On the edge of the wound, the epithelial tissue will start to develop, differentiate into adult normal skin tissue, and then the healing will slowly progress towards the middle of the wound and cover all the wound. In this horse, what we saw was that we saw islands of epithelial tissue in the middle of the wound, which is quite unusual for the wound healing, and we think that it might show that stem cells actually trigger the process of wound healing in these areas. Actually, these islands of the tissue also later developed the hair growth, so we think this is quite promising, but as I said, this is only one experiment without proper control, so we cannot say that it was really done with that. So we hope to use in the future that stem cells will be used for treatment of many diseases, both in humans and in our animal friends. And in the end, I would just like to mention a few people who are working on this field. We started all this stem cell work with Katarina Čeh, my PhD student at that time. Bojan Zorko is orthopedician at Veterinary School in Ljubljana, with whom we did all the clinical studies. Luka Mohoric was very talented student of biotechnology. He's now a director of AnimaCell. He's really a very able young man who can equally well do in the lab, in the marketing, and as a manager. And we also have more help from Urška Mađarac, Meta Zarnik, who's a young researcher in my lab currently, and Nate Hren. And with this, I will finish, and we can start the discussion. So, thank you very much.
As I said, it was exciting, and I believe that you have many questions or comments or thoughts about this kind of techniques. It was actually it's still promising, but there are huge, and also some misperceptions in the past about the potentials, and a lot of fear on one side, a lot of hope on the other. And then at the end, I think we are now more or less there where we basically are with stem cells.
We are getting there, but it's slow progress because we have to understand that with regular drugs like chemical substances, it usually takes about 10 to 15 years from finding a new substance that's very similar to some well-known substance to get this as a drug on the market. So with stem cells, which is a completely new concept of treatment, it's understandable that we cannot get to the market very far, that cannot get into clinical medicine very quickly. And perhaps in the past there were some promises also by scientists erroneously done, showing that very quickly we will get these treatments into the clinical medicine. And that's part of today's world also, because everything is expected to be very quick. Also, there is a big push for the grant money and everything, and we have to present things how they will be very useful, so maybe that's also part of the problem. But yeah, I think in a few years they will come into the clinical medicine, but we shouldn't be disappointed that it takes so much time because it's completely new kind of treatment. I mean, we found this with and my colleagues from AnimaCell are working with the vets in Slovenia, Germany, Austria, where we all have the vet clinics that we collaborate. It's very difficult to persuade the vets to start treatment because it's a completely new concept. This is not a drug that you give to get from a pharmaceutical company and you inject. You have to prepare the cells. You work with living organisms. And sometimes even very trivial things like for us working with cells, it's very important that it's completely sterile because one bacteria, it could regrow over the cells and everything would be destroyed. And for the veterinarian sterility, they think they disinfect the surgery field, and they think that's completely sterile, but it's not, because you have bacteria in the air everywhere, and they're often at the beginning, you have problems before we teach them how to work sterile, even though they think they do work sterile, but it's not, because in surgery, if you have few bacteria in the wound, nothing will happen. Usually you get also antibiotics after the surgery, but when we work with cells, we have to have complete sterile tissue sample.
But when you're coming to trials, is it difficult to get, let's say, participation of patients, or they're eager to participate? How do they perceive the technology?
Patients are, or owners in our case, yeah, they are very eager to participate. They are very happy with this. They are much less skeptical. They would quicker adopt the new method if you present it properly. So we usually don't have problems to get the patients to be involved in clinical trials, especially also because we give them financial incentive. The treatment is cheaper or even free. So,
but let's say with humans, it's probably also there is no problem.
No, I think there are a lot of people. I often get calls from the people that would like to be treated with stem cells also. So we have different questions. The best one, old lady once called me on the phone and asked if we can treat her dog who has diarrhea for 1 week, and if you can treat her because she has multiple sclerosis. Okay. Unfortunately, I have to answer her that neither of these things you can treat with stem cells.
So maybe there is a question now from the audience. We have one there immediately.
I have 2 questions for you. My first question is, I want to know how successful is the clinical application of embryonic stem cell?
Embryonic stem cells?
Yes, that's my first question. My second question is on the mesenchymal stem cell. During my studies, I came across the fact that mesenchymal stem cells have strong immunoregulatory properties. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how far this is true. And if this is true, indeed, what is the mechanism behind these immunoregulatory properties of mesenchymal stem cells?
First question. Embryonic stem cells have not been used in any clinical trials. I said during my presentation, not in controlled clinical trials that would be well performed. They are being used in some dubious clinics in countries like Russia and China, but they're not used in proper clinical trials, so we don't have any data about the clinical efficacy because there is a danger of tumor development. The second question, I showed towards the end how the stem cells work. They secrete a lot of cytokines, interleukins, TNF-alpha and things like that, and these molecules regulate the immune system. They work immunomodulatory. So they secrete these molecules, growth factors, cytokines that work on the immune system.
I think we have one more question.
Very nice lecture. I'm curious how much is well understood to explain the difference in, let's say, longevity of stem cells versus the others. Is it the concentration of telomerase? Is it the activity of it? Can you comment on those differences?
Very little is known about that. There is, as far as I know, there is no general rule that would show that cells that would divide for a longer time would have longer telomerases. There are exceptions to that, so there is no answer currently. There are some cells that have shorter telomerases and would still divide, some that have longer and would stop to divide, so it's still not clear as far as I know how much is the function of telomerase in actual process of aging and longevity of the stem cells, or is just some marker for the age.
Another question there.
If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that stem cells are actually found in a lot of tissues in the human body. So, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that stem cells are found in many tissues inside the human body anyway. So why the effort of extracting them and reworking them, putting them back? rather than just activating them somehow within the body. To me, it seems very mechanical, almost barbarian to extract something out, rework, put it back. So is there any effort to make it in a more elegant way?
Because we don't have at the moment any method to activate them, so we don't know first how to activate them, and secondly, there are few cells, there are not that many cells in the adult tissues. So the idea behind this treatment is to extract them from the body, expand them to make them, for example, we get from the adipose tissue that we collect from the dog patients, we get a few hundred or a few thousand cells, and then we expand them into several millions. So we use 3 to 4 millions for dogs, 5 to 6 millions for horses, and even longer. We started recently for stomatitis in cats. It's actually done with colleagues at University of Davis. Initially, they performed clinical trial, and we have one colleague at vet school in Ljubljana who worked at University of Davis with these colleagues, and together with her we started this. And this is systemic application, and we used twice 20 million cells. So basically you expand, and we don't know how to activate them. But the idea, yeah, it would be a good idea to activate them.
You mentioned about some ethical problems and what your vision, how to solve them. Probably you're working with this topic.
Yeah. I think adult stem cells are a good answer to that. At the moment, I don't see any big advantage of embryonic stem cells over adult stem cells, because we can find adult stem cells in tissues from all different layers, so we can find proper adult stem cells for pretty much every tissue. And because of that, I don't see that there would really be need for embryonic stem cells, because adult stem cells would be much easier to obtain, much cheaper to use for the treatment, and also there wouldn't be ethical concerns.
Any other questions? If not, I have still one, because I'm very interested. You didn't talk about the cord blood stem cells. But now people are very interested in that, so they're storing blood for the future, for their kids. But we know that there is not a lot of them inside, so there are problems of few cells there, so they're not really applicable yet. But they're saying in the future we will develop methods to, I don't know, to expand them. So is this hope really feasible from this perspective now?
Actually, I don't like that question because I don't. There are two reasons for that. One is personally, I think it's not really worth it, because we have adult stem cells that could be found in a lot of different tissues. There are very few cells in cord blood. It's difficult to expand them. So at the moment, with our knowledge, it's very difficult to use them. They could be only used, and they were only used in few cases of child leukemia with very young children, 6 to 8 years old. In general, medical community is against that. There are, I know in Britain and some other gynecological society, like Royal College of Obstetricians in Britain, have issued official advice not to do this, because they think it attracts attention from the patient to the cord blood. They have to collect the cord blood very quickly after the birth, and if there are any complications, it might actually pose some problem for they wouldn't care properly for the newborn. Also in France and Italy, they are not allowed to have a private cord blood banks. So it's a very difficult question to answer, and I said I don't like this question because I said that personally I do not believe this is a proper way to do it, but then maybe somebody will develop something, maybe there will be some breakthrough how to use these cells in the future, and you can use them for some treatment. And I don't want to be held accountable when that's I said to somebody, oh, don't do that, and then they could be used. But with my children that are now 10 and 8 years old, when my son, 10 years old, was born, they didn't have, it wasn't yet present in Slovenia, but with the daughter we stored blood in a public bank, which is free, not commercial bank, which works slightly differently. You don't own the cells, you put them in the bank, like you put the bone marrow cells into the bank or transfusion blood, so anybody can use it. And that for me this is fine, because they're used at the moment for childhood leukemia, and to have two children my child and somebody else child with the same genetic makeup develop childhood leukemia, I think the chances are negligent. So for me, this is a much better way to do it.
Okay. So if there is no other questions, I would like to thank you very much for the lecture and
Thank you for
discussion.
the invitation.